Cassie Hammett.
So who do we have here today?
Yeah, Cassie.
Cassie Hammett.
Yes.
I got to ask you a quick question.
Yeah.
I'm pulling up, and there's a bumper sticker, and it says, I love Shreveport.
Yeah.
Is this yours?
Yes. We go to Lang Orthodontics.
Okay.
And they have
Shout out.
those shout out Lang.
Lang.
They have those on the way out, and my kids always take like 6. And then they're like magnets, and then we'll realize like weeks down the road that they've stuck them at like random spots on our car.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So like we've had I love name a random school.
Yeah.
Because
okay.
they make them for like schools.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it'll be like, I love South Highland, and we don't even go there.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I actually didn't until right now. I didn't know that magnet was on my car.
Yeah.
So for a while there, I had some friends managing one of those drive-through car wash places. And inside the kind of hidden was a metal door for storage. So all the magnets that would come off, they would just put on there.
Oh, yeah.
But it was the best thing. If you knew somebody going through there, you just slap a random magnet on the back
one.
of it. Yeah. It was great stuff. It was good stuff. Good stuff.
Well, the reason why I ask you is I think that it's fitting, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
When we're talking about you, your story, your mission, your life, and there's so
Cassie loves
much.
Shreveport.
There's so much to unpack, right?
Oh,
but
yeah.
really, if anybody can say I love Shreveport, it's
Yes.
you, right?
Yeah.
I mean, how does that bounce off?
Some days.
Yeah, it's true. It is true. I think it's true for me in a way that is a little more attached to like a calling than it is to just like a geographic place. So the things I love about Shreveport, when people dog the city, talk bad about it, it makes me really sad. I understand it, right? Like I understand it. I'm not stupid. I live here too. Like there's things about it that aren't awesome. But I think the things that I love about this city are not the things that like the Tourist Bureau talks about. I think it's the people. I think you don't find, people like Shreveport people anywhere. We have locations of the Hub all over the country. So we travel a whole lot. And we always talk about like just how unique the community is here and how uniquely connected everyone is here. And there's just a deep sense of community here that you just don't find anywhere else. So that's really cool. And I do love Shreveport in the sense of the potential that the city has for change. And it's a scrappy city. Like, you know what I mean? Like on paper, sometimes not doing great, not up and to the right, but it stays, right? There's a sense of scrappiness that I really do love. And I do get to see from my, perspective, I do actually get to see some of the negative things that people talk about actually changing, and moving in a positive direction, one person at a time. So I think, when people are like, oh, I'm exhausted by the crime, or I get that. I understand it. Mm-hmm. But I also have a perspective working with not just, people in material poverty and those segments of our city, but also working with city leadership and, just getting a different perspective that says it's not all bad actually. And people aren't just sitting on their hands doing nothing, because I think that's another thing people easily say is like leaders need to do, and it's like they are like, and I get to see that. So I think I just have a really unique perspective that gives me a lot of depth of care for the city.
Yeah.
I got so much.
Let's start at the very beginning.
Okay, because I got so much that just came out of that.
Start at the beginning.
Yes.
Me and Cassie have known each other since middle
Too
school.
long. Yeah. Long enough to have embarrassment.
We grew up in the youth group together.
Yeah.
But she was not an Eagle. She was not an
No, she you went to Shreve?
Mm-hmm.
Shreve?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, no, not Trinity Heights Eagle. She was a few years behind us, but yeah, she we grew up in the youth group together. Mm-hmm. So it was great. I went to visit y'all's church the other day. Mm-hmm. I told you about that. I saw Brent.
Oh yeah.
Your brother was playing guitar. I saw your parents sitting over there.
What church
it was crazy.
We go to City Church.
City Church. Okay.
Formerly Church at Red River.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
Artist formerly known as.
Yeah. So anyways, so we grew up in high school at the church together. Then we went to college together. But Cassie hung out with the cool kids in college. Yeah, she's dating the drummer.
Yeah.
At, big worship band on campus. So
I can tell you probably weren't.
Yeah,
It was kind of like one of those. Hi.
Yeah.
I'm across the cafeteria.
I'll get back to playing Halo. But yeah, so when it was funny because, and I knew that part of you, and then I remember a couple years later, it being the big stuff coming out about you getting going through the mission board and starting the hub and all this stuff, and I was like, I thought what everybody else thought. I'm like, what's she doing? Like, this is crazy. And so, but then I remember we reconnected when you had first started the hub, and we'll get into what the hub is, but I remember we had fairly newly started the church I go to, Covenant Church, like 13 years ago, 12, 13 years ago. And you were the only person at the hub. I feel like it was you and pulling a white trailer.
Yeah, there was like maybe 2 other people,
some
maybe
interns or something. So
interns,
we would pull up to the park in
Allendale
on Wednesday nights or whatever, and it was just crazy. I mean, we would pull up to this empty park, the white trailer pull up, we'd start setting up the grill and all this stuff, and within 10 minutes there are 100 kids coming to get popsicle, ice cream, get a burger. Maybe they're only middle of the week probably. I mean, it's crazy. And that was like my first experience of like, this is insane. I mean, you don't even know what to say. It's crazy. So yeah, that was my first experience. So, yeah. But so let's talk about it.
Yes, and the hub from there.
Hub. Let's talk about the hub.
Solo joint to where it is today. Like, holy cow.
When was that? When did it officially start?
2007.
2007. Okay.
It's funny. We got our official status as 501c3 in 2009, but we started in 2007. And it's interesting because I say in some ways that I accidentally started it. And what I mean by that is that I didn't wake up one day or go to school to start a nonprofit or wake up one day with a master plan for how to start a nonprofit that addresses injustice. That's just not my story. That is not at all what it was. I think people assume that that's what it was, and it was quite literally the opposite. I, coming out of college, or I guess through college, the Lord was really reckoning with me about, what it says in Scripture about the poor and the vulnerable and, the foreigner, widow, orphan, all of those things. And the way that not just me, but most Christians were living their lives, right? Like for me, there was I felt the chasm between, well, clearly this is what it says, but like that is not something that I personally am doing, nor being sort of encouraged to do outside of just like go on a mission trip once a year, right? Which there's nothing wrong with that, but that's a very traditional Christian experience, especially I think that's changing a little bit, but back then was like, we go do missions. Oh, yeah. We drop in somewhere. Sure. I was actually a professional clown. I don't know if you remember this.
I remember
in our youth group
tour.
days. Yes, the clown tour in Mexico. I was a clown. I was a professional clown. I went to clown school.
Yeah.
To be a professional clown on this mission trip. So I had a very.
I think Stephen McKinney was also. Was Stephen McKinney also? He was the other clown.
It was literally a 3-day intensive.
Okay, it's a 3-day. It's more of a workshop boot camp.
I was not certified, but. Anyways, that was my experience, was drop in somewhere once a year, do good things or whatever, come back, give a report in church, and everyone feels awesome. And then that's it, And I'm thankful for those trips and experiences because they actually are, for me, a part of what sort of dislodged something in me. Like, the older I got, the more these trips were impacting me. And then I was dealing with this friction of like, all none of my friends were, but I was getting back and being like, does anyone else feel messed up
Yeah.
you know, about what we saw or what we experienced or whatever. So those trips were really important in my story because it was just sort of pulling me along this idea of like when I was 16, I went on a trip to San Francisco, and that's the trip I think where I understood, oh, this is something about me. Like this isn't an experience everyone is having.
Yeah.
There's something going on in my soul that is specific to me. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like God is asking something different of me.
Yeah.
This isn't just like everyone's feeling this way. Didn't know what to do with that at 16. I was an idiot. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, you know, no 16-year-old would know what to do with that. But I can kind of see that I came to a conclusion of like, oh, this isn't everyone's experience, and they're not struggling in some of the ways that I am. So I think this is something the Lord is saying directly to me, and now it makes sense.
Yeah.
Right? With hindsight, I can see that. But anyway, so through college, I was really like torn. I started as an interior design major. I actually still have a passion for that. I love it. It's one of my favorite things to do. Really wanted to do that. My aunt is a big interior designer in Ruston. Honestly wanted to work for her. That literally was the thing I wanted to do. And just, I could not shake this like thing the Lord was doing in me. So I changed my major to, I was at Tech, so there weren't a ton of options, you know, like there wasn't like a glaring major that would work for like what I was feeling. I didn't want to be a social worker, you know, so I chose public communication, or speech communication, which is the best major at Tech. And it's interesting because I use it every single day, you know, like yesterday I spoke at something and someone after was like, you are such a gifted and anointed speaker. And I'm like, yes, thank you. I paid a lot of money to be gifted at it. The anointing, that's the Holy Spirit's job, but like I hope I'm good at it because I went to school for 4 years. But so changed my major, but I came out of college, got married, came out of college with this sort of internal, it felt like a mandate to figure out, I didn't have the answers, but to figure out how to reconcile what I was feeling between what I knew to be true about my own faith, my own story, and then this big chasm between me and in Ruston, there was one homeless dude who was so sick of me. Like literally, when he saw my car, I'm not joking, he did his very best to get away. Like he was like, here she comes again, you know.
So you graduated and stayed in Ruston for a while?
Not long. We stayed for less than a year.
Okay.
But so I took a job here in Shreveport. At this time they were opening the new rescue mission that's downtown now. First, you know, they were opening that facility, women and children, for the first time, you know, that portion of their ministry was opening. And so I actually took a job. I was the first employee of the women's side. So I took a job. We moved to Shreveport for that reason. And in all honesty, that was a like A plus B equals C in my mind. Like I was like, oh, this is it. Like this matches the things that have been going on in me. I'm going to now get to show up every day and serve, you know, unhoused women and children. And like, it was just kind of like, oh yeah, check.
Yeah.
That has not typically been the way the Lord has worked in my life. I didn't know that at the time, but it just felt very like formulaic. Oh, this is a salary job with benefits. Sweet. Like this checks all the boxes. Brent was still a touring musician, so he could live anywhere. Still is that way. So we moved to Shreveport. I started that job, and I now know that job was a positional move, right? It was just getting us here because we would not have come back here. I mean, at the time there was no like real, my family's here, but we didn't want to live here. Not in like we hate this place, but it just wasn't the plan.
Yep.
And so that job, you know, physically got us to this city, and I worked there for about 9 months. And during that time, it's like the volume turned up in me. Like, this is not the final, like, it just was like not, I had this weird like cognitive dissonance of like, okay, this isn't the whole point.
Yep.
I learned so much working there, you know, getting to be around all day long women who were experiencing so much trauma, and it was by far one of the most valuable experiences. But the longer I was there, the more clarity I gained around what I was actually feeling. And what I was actually feeling wasn't just about people in poverty. It was about both people in poverty and people who aren't. Like it became really clear of like, I'm actually called to the poor, but I'm called to that chasm in between. On like
how to engage.
Yeah, like I could not have told you what I meant by that. I just knew
the apathetic.
Yeah,
Christian
between material wealth and material poverty, I felt very called to that gap.
Yeah.
I have never had a cynical view of that gap. I think that's something that does surprise people about me. Never one time was that a cynical feeling. Still isn't.
Yeah.
In the sense of like, you aren't doing what, I have
shame on you for having a nice house.
Legitimately, I've never.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there are people who take me out, you know what I mean? But like, in a general sense,
Sure.
I have never been cynical about that. I always felt very tender towards the misconceptions, tender towards the lack of understanding, the lack of awareness, the same things I had. Like, so the longer I was at the rescue mission, that really is the clarity I was gaining, is like, oh, I do actually feel called to give my life away to those in poverty, still do. But also equally so, I feel called to like helping other people understand. And it's funny because I didn't even understand it at the time. But, and so I increasingly began to feel miserable there because it was like I now had this clarity, of like, what I didn't know what that meant, but I knew that wasn't going to happen there, that wasn't the role I was playing necessarily. And so I went home for lunch one day and Brent was like, look, it's clear to me that this is not like where you are now is not exactly where you're supposed to be. Like, we've been poor before because we were poor. We lived in a condemned property that the city was like, that's on you. If anything happens, we're not liable. He's like, we've done it before. Just quit. Because it's not worth the tension you're feeling and the negative sides of working there. Because there were some negative sides, if I'm being honest. Like, I'm not going to get into that, but it wasn't a good fit for me. And so I went back and quit my salary insurance job working with the poor, which did not make sense to me. Logically. It made sense to my soul. Like, I wasn't scared, but I felt like an idiot. Like, I got in the car after and I was like, like, seriously, what did I do? Like, so, I had at the time, I grew up Leighton and I went to church together, and then our family moved to Broadmoor Baptist, and there was a guy there, Tom Harrison, shout out, the Godfather.
I know Tom.
Yeah. Wild.
I started, so I know Tom from being a Disciple Now leader for Jared Osborne.
Oh, yeah, okay.
In their house.
Yeah.
They were a host home.
At the time, he was really one of the only voices in my life that was like a mentor voice. And so I just like literally drove to his office. I walk in, I sit down, I start hysterically crying. And he's like, what's wrong? I was like, I just quit my job. And he was like, okay, like, why? And I was like, so I'm like saying all these things that I'd been feeling. And for the first time, I was saying them to someone other than Brent. I mean, Brent knew all this, and so he was like, oh, let me pray for you. And I'm like, okay, well, I need a little bit more than prayer, but like, you know what I mean? So he prayed for me and sent me on my way. And I went home, and then like 2 days later, he called me and he was like, hey, I haven't been able to really like shake our conversation. I haven't, like, it's been waking me up at night, like just this dream that you have. And he was like, I have decided I want to pay you a full-time salary to figure this thing out. And literally that's how the Hub started, which is crazy. So truly, when I say I accidentally started it, I didn't have a 5-year plan of what this would look like. And so Brent was like, well, what are you going to do on your first day it was July 1st of that year. He's like, what are you going to do? I was like, literally, I don't know. Like, I don't know. And so I just went downtown because at that time I had met a lot of unhoused people just because I'd been working in the shelter. And so I just went and literally just like went and hung out with them day after day after day, and just realized that, oh, I can actually, like, these can actually be friends.
Yep.
Like important people in my own life. Like this
Yeah.
isn't just, and so essentially what ended up happening was the more I learned about these new people in my life and their stories, and, you know, like they would invite me over to dinner in their homeless camps, and, you know, I would go, and just like anyone goes to your houses. One time Brent and I like walked through the woods. This guy had invited us to dinner, and he had, I guess, probably stolen or gotten out of the trash pile like 4 feet of a gate, like a privacy gate. And it was just like propped up in the middle of the woods, and it was his like front door. And like we walked up to it and just kind of like, and he was like, 1 second. And we were like, oh, okay.
Tidy up.
Yeah, let me tidy up. Yeah. And so
did you just like go through the gate and you're like in the
we could have like
woods?
we could have gone around like,
Yeah,
you know what I mean,
exactly.
the sides. And so yeah, you like open and we
That's a
go
great
in,
story.
and it's just like the
Yeah,
woods, you
yeah.
know. But I mean, it was like a setup. Like he
Yeah.
had like a little living area, and you know,
Yeah.
he was literally sitting there playing Sudoku, like
Yeah.
just chilling. He's like, you know,
So really it's, you know, when I think of it is there was a need, obviously a blaring need,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then you just took action. You just like that.
yeah.
You didn't know what to do. So you just started.
Sure, I do. Yes, but I do think it's important for you guys to know I wasn't showing up to all of these interactions with like food and stuff, and it wasn't like that.
Yeah.
It was a I'm not saying that I didn't like take care of people as I was learning things, but I didn't have this like, I'm going to go downtown with, you know, 20 boxes of food.
Sure.
And I legitimately was just earning friendships, like just earning my way into this world, because truthfully, it is like a big part of successfully serving people in material poverty is trust.
Yeah.
And so, and I didn't have that formulated plan. Like this
And that is a fundamental characteristic or a core value of the Hub
Yes,
today.
is friendship, yeah.
It's
That's right.
not just meeting the physical need. And that's
Right.
what 99% of the nonprofits that are
Yeah.
doing this is. We're going to give you food, we're going to give you somewhere
Yeah.
to sleep, give you clothes.
Yeah.
But you are more of almost a holistic approach to.
well, yeah, because I'm
solving the
learning
problem.
about them.
Yeah.
You know, and so essentially, to speed this story up, what ended up starting to happen was I was learning all this information about all these people, and because I grew up here, I knew a lot of people. I mean, you know, I'd been here my whole life. So honestly, all I started doing was just like telling people, like I'd be like, guys, I went to dinner at this guy's house in the woods, and this is the story he told me. And, you know, these are these massive deficits that exist in his life. And now I have to reckon with the fact that I have a friend who is going 7 days without eating or whatever it might be. And so I just started telling people, and this is what part of why I love Shreveport. Never, ever, when I told those stories, was I met with, like people are like, uh-oh, what do we got to do?
Yeah.
What do we got to do? So I would be like, well, he needs, you know, these 10 things. So they would be like, oh, because this is how it is.
Yeah.
No big deal. So they'd pick up the phone, call their friends, whatever, their small group, whatever it might be, call me back the next day and be like, hey, we collected everything. We went to Walmart. We had a blast doing it. You know, I think this is sort of where I can look back and see this is where the Hub sort of set itself apart, is this moment in here. So, hey, we had so much fun. All the girls, we went to Walmart, we went shopping, we have all this stuff. We're going to bring it to you so you can take it to him. And I would say, oh no, I'll meet you down there. I didn't buy this stuff. You did. And you'd hear this like, this like hesitation and be like, no, it's okay.
Yeah.
You can take it.
Yeah.
Like, no, I'm not going to do this work for you. I mean, so meet me down at, you know, this cross street, and we're going to go under this bridge. And so you have this group of women who thought their big task was just going to Walmart and buying stuff, is now like lugging all this stuff down a hill under a bridge. And when that was happening, they were leaving changed, because you can't do that and stay the same.
Yeah.
And so I think that was the catalyst, right?
Yeah.
That because the Hub has always invited people in.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times nonprofits will either point the finger cynically and say, we'll do it, don't worry about it. Or, no, you bring us the stuff, you're not trained enough to do it, or whatever. There's often a dynamic that exists where people don't really feel like they can be an actual part of people's life changing. Like they can come and organize a closet or sweep out something or whatever, and they can do these like peripheral things. But this was like, oh no, like we're gonna do the thing, like, you know. And now you know him, and now you and your 10 friends have to go home and be like, what did we just see, you know? Again, that was not a part of some master plan. That was just me going, man, I want you to know what I know. Yeah. And that has been for me personally, has been the underlying thread through the Hub is I just want people to know what I know. Yeah. And I don't want to take that from someone I don't want to do the work for you when you could come and be transformed by this. And so that's kind of what I think. That's why it was this sharp up and to the right, really rapid growth is because people were like, oh gosh, like we can do something. Yeah.
When you talk about at the beginning, like the Shreveport people are just different. There's just this, the majority of the people are willing to serve and to take action and to do things.
And the chasm exists. What I found in our city was, you know, we had all these amazing churches, like the most church city, you know, you could imagine. All this stuff going on spiritually in a positive way, and this big gap. And my assumption was, oh, the gap just exists because what I started seeing was, oh, there's just a gap here because people don't know what to do.
That's true.
It's not that they don't want to. It's not that, you know, whatever church on the corner doesn't want to help the city or doesn't want, you know, there are churches that don't want to. I mean, we can't be pie in the sky here, but for the most part, it's just that no one had ever been a guide to say, hey, it's cool that you don't understand this. You shouldn't. Like you know, you haven't experienced it. You don't see it very often. So the Hub has always served as the guide between, right, in that chasm to say, we have to understand how to serve people in material poverty in a way that is holistic, biblical, actually produces something, like isn't just about charity.
And I think back to when I started helping serve with the Hub, you know, my mindset growing up in the setting I did with my dad being a very conservative Baptist pastor, and that's the churches I grew up in, and our missions was a very evangelical approach, right? Is we'll go down to the homeless community and, like, you know,
give out tracts,
you know, paint something on a board and tell a message, right? But there was nothing further than that, right? And so that was kind of the idea. And so then you drive through downtown and you see homeless people, and you're like, you know, well, I don't want to do that, but, you know, and I feel bad, but what do you do? There's no right. And that's really, I feel like when I can sum up in my experience with the Hub, it's y'all really shined a light on the issue that brought some clarity to churches or people in the community, but then also gave a framework for them to step into, right? 'Cause it's like, well, I would love to go serve a dinner, but I mean, how do you even start? How do you
that's right. How we did a lot of the work for, and still do. I mean, that's the role that we play, is like we set up the opportunities, and we're there to facilitate and, you know, again, be a guide. But we want people to come and engage, and you know, that's what really changes a city, you know, like, is when both sides are engaging with each other. And that's not just material and non-material, that's politically or whatever. Like, change doesn't come in an echo chamber, right? So, so that's kind of like the story. And I think what set us apart, and still probably does set us apart, it's just the invitation to people to come and be idiots about it. I mean, because I was a freaking idiot. Like, I look back when I was, you know, hanging out, and I had so much I had so many misconceptions. I had so much junk in me that they worked out. Like, that, you know, they would call me on stuff and be like, well, you know, I think some of the stuff that I learned really early on is some of the assumptions we have about people are just flat out wrong. And so all of that worked out all this junk in me, and still does. I mean, I still walk away from things like, oh gosh, I don't like that.
What do you think the biggest assumptions or misconceptions are?
I think a lot of people assume when they see someone who's unhoused that they're lazy, they're a drug addict, that they got there because of their wrong choices only. You hear a lot of like, well, I'm sure that they did something in their life that, it's kind of like in the Bible when, I can't remember, in the New Testament, it's like, who sinned? Like they see the blind guy and they're like, who sinned, him or it's kind of like, well, if you're like that, like something, you sinned. Like,
sure.
I think there's another misconception that people in material poverty don't know the Lord, and that it is, primarily we got to get down there and evangelize, when in fact a lot of them have very deep faith. So that's and have a lot to offer. Because they have suffered, and suffering, we know in scripture what it says about suffering is that it produces something in you. And so when you sit with someone who knows the Lord and has suffered to the degree that a lot of our friends have, it has produced things in them that have not been produced in me. And so I think there's a big misconception there. I think the biggest one is it lands between they did something wrong. They don't want different. If they wanted different, they could just go get a job.
Get a job.
So those categories.
So let me ask you this. Let's talk about some just logistics and operations now. So when you started, it was just you had a little white trailer.
Which we just said goodbye to.
Did you? Oh, I think that's what jarred my memory when you sold it. I was like,
I took a picture hugging it. Because that trailer had been around the Hub
since the beginning.
Almost as long as me.
So now, and of course we can talk about your other cities you're in, but just talking about Shreveport, right? You see at the Lovewell, how many, because this is really geared towards small businesses, but how many just paid staff do you have?
So there are 16 of us
16?
Split between, so the Hub has 3 primary ministries here in the city. We have the Lovewell Center, which is downtown. That is our membership-based resource center for people in material poverty and who are experiencing homelessness. Then we have Purchase Not for Sale, which is our anti-trafficking ministry. We work with adult women who are being exploited, sexually exploited, high-risk children, high-risk teenage girls, and then identified victims of trafficking, both adult and child. That's our populations at Purchase. And then the third ministry is Rise Up and Roast, which is our new coffee company that we've launched as a social enterprise to employ people out of all the programs of the Hub. So that is 16 people, mostly full-time, split between running the Hub, so like our leadership development team, and then those 3 ministry lanes.
And if you want to talk about just resource allocation, which one takes, if there's the pie, which one is taking up most resources out of the 3?
It depends on what resource you're asking. I would say the Lovewell Center, we clear the most amount of physical resources through that ministry. So
food.
Oh my gosh,
clothing,
the hustle that we have to keep those shelves stocked is insane. So I would say that is the biggest weight that we carry as far as resources goes. There's 6,000 members of the Lovewell Center. So I'm always like, please do not all show up at one time, because we would not be able, we'd have to close. But what that translates to is like when our grocery store, we have a grocery store inside called the Eat Well. It's open every day. And we can have 120 people shop in a day. So because the way our model is, people are earning credits to shop in those stores.
Well, let's talk about the model.
Okay,
So to earn credit, what is there doing? Because I know you have a lot of volunteers. That was my next question: how many volunteers are on a regular basis?
Right.
Because there's a lot more than 16 paid employees to run all this, right?
Yeah. So at the Lovewell Center, it's membership based. That's on purpose. We want people to feel like they belong there and not just tolerated. So
and how do you become a member?
You can come. You just come in.
Just come in. Okay.
Low barrier.
Okay.
You just
show up.
You show
Walk
up
around the gate.
You just show up. Once someone becomes a member, you don't have to be a member to come into the Lovewell. We have a lot of stuff going on. Like, you can watch TV, eat, drink coffee, use the Wi-Fi, whatever. But once they become a member, they get access to a schedule of classes that are going on every day that we're open. They can also go to do certain programs, go to counseling. There's a lot of ways we've incentivized pretty much anything to earn credits on their account. And so they can go to those classes, and the classes are not just busy work. They're aimed at the systemic issues at play with material poverty. So healing sort of the deeper issues going on. So
almost like a therapeutic or like a
Yeah.
Like a counseling.
Yeah, that's
almost
right. Yeah,
type
it depends. It depends
situation,
on the class. We
little
try in a day.
trauma or-
Yes. So we have a class called Trauma Rama.
Okay,
We
yeah.
try to make it sound fun. So we have classes about trauma, how to deal with it, how to deal with your, triggers, coping mechanisms, all the way through a drum circle creative writing class. We vary it so that it's not all heavy, topics
sure.
all day long. But yeah, so they're earning credits as they go to those classes, and then they can use those credits to shop in our stores. We have the Eat Well, which is a grocery store. We now have the Dwell Well, which is a home goods store. It's literally like a closet, but it's cool. And then we have the Dress Well, which is a clothing store. And then we have like a industrial laundromat on property called the Smell Well.
So let me ask you this, just caveat here. So people listening that want to give to that, do they just show up with stuff, or how do they get you clothes and food?
So
and
on our website you can click on donate, and there's a drop down that says physical items, and it has a list of our most needed items right now, what time you can drop it off when. But yeah, it's like we intake donations all day long into our facility. Cool. So they can shop. So the Lovewell model is belonging, earning and empowerment, and power of choice. Power of choice being, you can choose how you earn these credits, but most importantly, you can choose how you spend them. So, most of the time, people in material poverty's experience of receiving resources or receiving help is, showing up somewhere, getting in a line, and there's something pre-made. Yep. Pre-made food bag, food box, pre-made hygiene bag. Obviously, nothing wrong with that. That good intentions, nothing wrong with that. You're addressing, but for the person in line, right? If that is their pretty much daily life, it's not a dignifying experience to have your choices removed and sort of be in this category of like, which is such a Southern phrase, but like you get what you get and you don't throw a fit, right?
my daughter says that.
Yeah, none of us like that.
To my 5-year-old.
Yeah, and honestly, it's a zinger. None of us live that way in reality. We have a lot of autonomy and a lot of choice. Yeah. And so we want to, a big part of at the level what we're trying to do is give that choice back, give that autonomy back, and say, you earned this. So nobody goes to the grocery store with me and hits my hand when I have full autonomy to spend my money however I want to, whether that's wisely or not wisely. So now when they go in every week and shop for groceries or get clothes, it's not just food that they need, but it's also, and this is I think a little bit of a controversial thing that the Hub talks about a lot, is like, okay, yeah, sure, survival, but we also want them to get stuff they want. Yeah. and for some reason people really struggle with that. And it's like, but like no one in our life, hopefully, is just barely making it by. Sure. I mean, there is a part of life where we do actually get to drop by somewhere and get lunch that we want, or go buy a new shirt if we want it, right? Like, it can't just be about survival. Yeah. And so we do meet a lot of those survival needs, but what we find is Lovewell members are able to just shop the way that you and I do.
Yeah. I've been in there before.
Yeah, it's awesome.
It's crazy.
So here's the thing, we fight really hard to have the best stuff on the shelves because they're earning it. And that model creates a lot of accountability for us to say, well, if I'm going to a class earning something and then I go in the store and it's crap, I'm going to stop going to class.
I remember one time we went and served, my business went and served there, and that was it. It was like, hey, we have all of these clothes that need to be hung up. And I remember somebody being like, hey, we're not going to put that on the shelf. And I'm thinking, these people need clothes. Why would you not? Right.
Yeah.
But it was a standard.
We're picky.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was crazy. And that helped me understand, there's this mind shift of.
Yeah. And we pay attention to like what doesn't move, like what sits on the shelf. And if it sits on the shelf, then it's so crazy, but it's how every other thing runs. Yes. Right. And so it keeps us on our toes, right? To when we open those stores, we want it to be the best of what we can find, and it is the best. I mean, like, it is truly, it's amazing. So they're leaving with stuff they want, simple things like being able to, I was talking to a Lovewell member the other day, and she had gone into the Eat Well to buy ingredients to bake a cake for her neighbor. That isn't a big deal to us, but to someone in material poverty, to have the wiggle room to be able to be generous is very rare.
Yeah.
And so I think that's one of my favorite parts of the model, besides like the big things like moving people into housing and all that stuff we're doing. My favorite parts are those nuanced things that you are watching people be generous, take care of each other, have the breathing space to think about something other than just like getting through this next moment.
Yeah.
We have a guy that has like literally 20,000 Lovewell points, I think. And he has a disabled son. And one day we were joking with him. We were like, we kind of feel like you're planning to like take over the Lovewell because like you have 20,000 points. Like you could literally
lottery tickets.
Exactly. You could literally shut us
big.
down.
Yeah.
And he like just with a straight face was like, oh no, like he's older. This member is. And he was like, my adult son is disabled, which his son comes every day. He knows how to walk from his apartment to the Lovewell because they live at the Fairmont, so he can just walk straight down. But he's severely disabled. And he said, when I die, this is his inheritance. This is all he'll have. And it was like, you know, it was like hitting a brick wall of like, oh, this is why this model matters, is because this friend now feels the security of like, I can pass my own life. I can take care of my son because he knows how to get there. You know, he knows us, and now he would have, you know, enough points to shut us down essentially. So I think those are my favorite parts of that model is just the dignity of life stuff that has been removed.
Is there and I don't want to, it's hard for me to shift business, you know,
no, it's okay,
I'm involved with my church too, but when we ask church decisions, it's hard for me not to think through a business mindset,
totally,
right? So like when you think of the flow through your organization, like, is there a finish line? Is there a ultimate goal where it's like, hey, this person has successfully gone through our program? And like, what does that look like? I mean, and then can you share maybe a story or two of some that have successfully completed?
So there's yes and no to that. So inside of the hub, there are programs that have, you know, start and stops. Why I say there's a no side to that is because in a lot of ways, even those who graduate are, because we build such strong community, it's not like a yays and we never see them again. You know what I mean? So
do they end up coming back and serving and helping? So
we have like Lovewell crew, which are people who have completed programs and are now like interns. We have, you know, so there's a lot of that.
So what would a life paint a picture of a life of someone when you're like, hey, this person has this is happening.
So I just recently told this story on a podcast with her. Her name's Tiffany. If you want to hear the podcast, the hub has a podcast. We put out one episode a year.
There you go.
One a year. We are big time.
Room for growth.
So we just recently told her story on that podcast, but you know, we met her in jail here, Purchase did, and started going and visiting her just like a traditional, that's how we always do things, is when women are incarcerated for certain charges, including prostitution, things like that, we go and visit. So we met her that way. She came into our residential program. So Purchase has a 9 to 12 month residential program. They live on property with us way outside of the city limits in Bossier, and then come in every day to our facility in Shreveport for classes and counseling, and they go to the gym and equine therapy and all that kind of stuff. So she had gone through that program. She completed it successfully. She graduated. She graduated around 9 months or whatever. What's cool about the third part of what we do, Rise Up and Roast, that coffee company is built into the recovery programs. So every person in a program at the hub, at some point, depending on their program, is different, but at some point early in their recovery becomes an employee with us. The reason we do that is because, you know, if you, Leighton, got dropped into a recovery program tomorrow and they said you can't work for a year, what would you feel like?
Helpless.
Yeah. What about you?
Sure.
Yeah.
Same.
It would be horrible.
Yeah.
Because we were made to work, right? Like we were created, we have this innate thing in us. But that's
useless. Yeah.
Yeah, that is a really traditional thing, is, you know, you have to not work until a certain point. None of us would be okay with that.
Yeah.
And that it's a very like chaotic feeling. And so when we launched Rise Up and Roast 3 years ago now, we wanted to address that. We wanted to say, what if we, introduced work and earning early so that it sort of eased that sense of helplessness, that sense of loss of autonomy. So Tiffany she was the first Rise Up and Roast employee. So she was the very first one when we launched. This was 3 years ago. So she worked for Rise Up and Roast, and while she did, she worked with a job coach. Anyways, ended up moving to Texas to work full time somewhere. For years was in Texas, and about 2.5 years later, hit just a typical rough spot in life. Finances got tight. She didn't have a whole lot of community where she was. And so she'll say this, one night I was like, I know the one place I need to be. She packed everything up and came back to Shreveport with no plan. Yeah. She just showed up at our building. And so she got employed at a restaurant here in town, but was just not able to make ends meet with that income and cost of living being as high as it is. So we offered for her to come back to Rise Up and Roast in between her shifts at this restaurant, just to sort of buoy her income. Because I remember talking to her and she showed me her budget and I was like, there's no grocery budget there. And she was like, oh yeah, I don't, like, she just literally was like, I don't eat. And I was like, you have to eat though. And she was like, I know, but I cannot allocate money to food. So I have to figure out, so she was in a really tight situation, and that's actually really common.
Yeah.
And so we were like, well, let's get you back on the payroll. You know how to do it. You were the first employee. She was an incredible employee. And so she came back just to supplement for a little while is what we thought. That was kind of the plan. And the longer she stayed the second time, it just became really clear that like she's an incredible employee. And so we just hired her full time at the Hub. Yeah. And so that's kind of a lot of our stories are that cool, right? Like meet someone at the bottom of their life and watch them, through this process graduate and be launched into self-sufficiency at a level of restoration that isn't just like, ooh, we hope you make it. Yeah. But it's like, oh no, you're going to be fine. Yeah. Like you're a good employee. You know what you're doing. You have done more work than most people will ever do in their lifetime to be healed. And so that's kind of a typical, we have a lot of stories of people who came, the first time we met them was through the Lovewell Center. Yeah. And through those relationships realized they actually were being trafficked and didn't know. And so then they transfer over to purchase through Rise Up and Roast. So we do have stories where they've been in every single part of what we do. That's actually really common as well. So, our like wins, like, I think at the Hub, we're not a big, like, count the wins, like graduates, because, if you measure success by graduation rates, you're going to be chasing your tail because, the populations that we're serving, very rarely do they complete it the first try, right? So like, I think that's another thing people have to understand. Our retention rates are really high in our program. So like we have a VIP program at the Lovewell. That's like a VIP perks, but higher accountability classes, things like that, counseling. And the other day I did like a retention. I try to do like retention check-ins just to see. I mean, we aren't a numbers driven place, but the numbers do tell you something. If a program is significantly under, then we have to look at it. But anyways, I asked Sarah Touch to tell me like what VIP, like what's the current like retention rate. And she went back to like 2022 to now. She emailed me back and she was like, it's 100%. And I was like, I'm gonna need you to run those numbers. Crazy. And so 100% retention rate. Yeah. And purchase retention rate is high for what that is. It's like a 70%. I mean, it's high for that population. Yeah. And I think the reason is because when we say retention, that doesn't mean that someone comes in the first time and doesn't bolt. Yeah. It's that we have these things in place for if they do decide to bail, unless they've done something crazy. Like we do have a list of things that we're like, you can't come back. Yeah. But it's a very short list. Yeah. They can always come back. Sure. Now there are boundaries and, things like that. But a lot of women who complete purchase, or a lot of people, it's not because they came in the first time, never relapsed, never failed. It's because they came, relapsed, tried again, relapsed, and then completed, right? Gotcha. So I think that that's important for people to know. Yeah. So the Hub does have this sort of always present idea because we are wanting to build community. And so we don't necessarily want the community we've built to feel like there's a finish line to that. Yep. But built into those programs, there are very clear finish lines. So it's kind of a both and. Yeah.
It's awesome. So I'm going to shift gears here a little bit.
Yeah.
We talk about scaling businesses a lot here. Mm-hmm. How do you take, because how many cities do you have a presence in now?
7
cities.
Mm-hmm.
You the first, if I remember correctly, the first city you went to from here was Vegas. Is that right?
Fort Worth.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then where?
Then Vegas.
Yeah. Okay. And then where else?
Lafayette.
Okay.
Denver.
Okay.
It's like a pop quiz. Macomb, Mississippi. We just signed on Houston.
Okay.
And then we're working with potentially New Orleans, I hope.
And is this someone in that community that's like, is there already a person there that's saying, hey, I want to bring what you're doing there here, or are y'all identifying cities?
No. So there's the way that we do it is there's someone there or something there, like an existing person, group of people. Okay. Everyone's been different.
Okay.
But they are autonomous from us, so we don't fund them. We always say, like, we don't mess with your money, we don't mess with your hiring and your firing. Like, that's all your problem, because we have our own problems in those categories. So, but they're all autonomous. But it's typically a group of people, an existing maybe ministry that needs to pivot. That's been different. The one in Vegas is a church. A church was like, hey, we want to take on human trafficking in the city. Mm-hmm. So each one has been different.
And so in order for you to decide, hey, is this going to be a good fit? Is it just like aligning
it's like dating.
On values? Yeah. So that's really, because my question is, how do you take and it goes to business too, and I hate to keep comparing it, but like for Josh, and he's going and now he has 3 stores. How do you take that culture and bring it to a whole nother place?
Yeah,
and the values stay.
It's very difficult. Yeah. I will say, duplicating strategies or like business checklists and like what to do. That's not hard.
Sure.
Like that's you just hand them the
process. Yep.
Yeah. The hard part is duplicating culture.
Yep.
And so I would say, for us, we had to narrow down like what are the non-negotiables of culture for us. And the reason we had to narrow that down is because there are a lot of non-negotiables for us here in Shreveport that wouldn't contextually make sense other places.
Sure.
So for the Hub's culture, towards those in poverty and towards the materially non-poor. So that's kind of how we think. What are the pillars or the non-negotiables, and way back when we started duplicating, how can we put that on paper, which is really hard to do, and make it measurable? Yeah. And so putting it on paper, narrowing it down, not it doesn't need to be 25 different things that people are having to figure out how to abide by.
Yeah.
What are the most important things, and what are things that we could assess? Because if you're like, we just want you to have a good culture, I mean, you literally, there's no way of measuring that. So how could we create clarity enough that we could drop into a city after it's been up for a year and assess it? Earning and empowerment. There's these pillars that we're able to relatively easily gauge how those locations are doing culturally. Yep. And then the other thing I would say is being available in an ongoing coaching relationship.
Gotcha.
Because for us, it's not a one and done thing. It's really easy to launch a ministry compared to how difficult it is to sustain it.
Yeah.
And to sustain the culture. Yeah. So the duplication network we have is called Namesake. So all of the namesakes, there's things they're required to do. One of those is ongoing coaching calls. The reason
is that with you?
With me or it depends. It depends on where they are in the process. Okay. If they're like up and running with the Lovewell, those are not going to be. They're going to be talking with the Lovewell team, but those calls are just as important for them to ask us questions as for us to gauge what's going on in that city. We also bring them here once a year. They just this actually just happened. Everyone comes here for a family reunion. That's actually really good for us as a team to see them and listen. We listen to the questions they're asking. We listen to the stories they're telling. We're making notes. Like, we're sitting in these sessions like, ooh, that's not a good question. You know, like that feels wobbly.
Yeah.
It gives us a lot of intel as to what we now need to go behind each team and sort of shore up. So really, it's less about that initial, like, here's the culture, and more about an ongoing tweak. That's like, hey, this is going in a direction that we don't love. Let's pause and redirect. I think the teeth that we have behind that is all of our names are copyrighted. And a big part of being in the namesake is using our names. And so we do actually have the ability to take our name back. So,
Yeah.
I mean, not like in a bully sense, but like if we got to a point with any of our cities, which I can't ever imagine happening, where we were like, the culture's tanking, you know, we do have the ability to say, you guys can keep going, but you can't keep going with our name or whatever.
Yeah.
So, but it is very difficult to duplicate culture. And I think one thing I have to keep in check for me personally is that none of these locations are going to feel like the Shreveport one. They're not going to feel the same way.
Yeah.
And that's okay, right? Like you're going for a 80, 20, 70, 30, you know, whatever the rule is, you know, you want there to be a majority of it that feels, you know, in sync. But I've had to learn how to let go of that. It doesn't feel exactly the same, or it's not as, you know, maybe not as robust or not as deep or not whatever.
Sure.
And realize that, like, that's okay.
Yeah.
As long as, you know, 70% of what I'm seeing is on track, the rest of that will work itself out or not, and that's okay. I think that's been really difficult, to not be like I'm not a micromanager by nature. I'm like, whatever the radical opposite is. Like, I probably should lean a little more that way, but I love to empower people and just let them do, you know, give them guardrails and all that kind of stuff. And Namesake gives me the opportunity to do that. Here's the guardrails, run with it, contextualize it, make it your own, because it has to be, like in Vegas, it has to be their own. It can't be a franchise.
Yep.
Right. It can't be like a McDonald's.
Yeah, sure.
So it's a balance, and it's not an easy one.
Yeah.
But it's worth it. Yeah.
I know when we said we're going to have you on, Josh was like, "Oh man, we need like 2 or 3 hours to have Cassie on."
We do, because there's so much
There's
stuff I
so
wanna
much,
get
and so
into.
we're going to have to do a part 2.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
Do
totally.
you have any
Absolutely.
pressing question? I have one more question. Do you have a question you want to
Well,
ask?
this is where part 2's got to come in, because I've got several. But ultimately, I want to thank you because you know, you have created something here in this city, and we're all here. We love our city.
Yeah.
We want to see good things for it. But being in that chasm between not only, you know, people with material wealth and people who do not have that, but also for people who would like to see the gospel in fruition in the city.
Yeah, that's right.
And you look around and you see all these churches and you go, this should be like paradise.
Yeah,
Why is it
sure.
not?
Yeah, yeah.
Why do we struggle? Why are
Yeah.
we the last, you know, like second to last on places for college graduates to live?
Yeah.
Why are we this way when we have all of this Jesus around us? So I want to thank you for standing in the gap for both of those things.
Yep.
And I want to encourage small business owners, if you're out there, and this is an amazing way to connect in a way that's very practical.
Yeah.
In a way that's cuts across like political divides,
Yeah,
right? Because
yeah.
you're asking a little bit of responsibility, but there's so much grace within it.
That's right.
I just think it's amazing what you've done.
Yeah.
So I just want to encourage you to keep going.
And
Yeah.
we do actually have a business network called Make It Your Business. And that's been really fun to grow over the last few years. Just the opportunity to invite businesses, local businesses, into the equation in a formal way, like in a way that gives them some skin in the game. That has been really fun to see the various businesses in so many different, you know, sectors really step up and say, you know, Metro Aviation is one of them, is going to make it their business to end human trafficking. It's really cool. Like and it gives them a sense of direction over how to apply their resources in the community, how to use their philanthropy dollars, how to get their employees engaged physically in hands-on ways. So, you know, if anyone listening, since we are talking, I guess, primarily to businesses, we do have that. It's on our website. You can find the interest form. But it's I think what makes it different is a two-way street. So, you know, for our businesses, the packet is like your part of the deal, our part of the deal, because we actually believe the sustainable way to be a partner is it's 50-50. I mean, you know, I think there's a traditional, I think business owners may like, you know, sort of flinch when they see a nonprofit coming, because it's like, we just need your money.
Yeah.
And we do need your money, hear me clearly. but for us, I think that just that sort of cold transactional thing is not really what we're looking for. Yeah. We want people to invest their dollars back into the city through the hub. But we want more than that in a lot of ways, to see that business connect its employees to what's going on in the city, for those employees to be transformed. You see, like, for it to be like,
it's awesome,
way more meaningful than just like, oh, we sponsored a 5K.
Yeah.
Well, for us, like, we just don't have that model. Like, we don't do event sponsorships, because it's like, well, we would love for you to be a sponsor financially, but this is what that's going to mean. It's for the whole year, and your name's on everything, and everyone's going to know that we're friends here. Like, these are two entities that are now fighting for this city together, instead of just like randomly sponsoring an event. So we do have that on the website. You can click on our partners and businesses really cool. and see that. You can see all the businesses. And I would encourage people, like, go to our business partner website and use those businesses. Yeah. That's what I always tell people, like, please, like, go there, look at who cares about things. And if you can choose someone on that list over someone else, do it, because these are businesses who have put skin in the game and seeing our city change.
Now, just the lay person, that was one of my questions: how could businesses get engaged? The other is just anybody, either a church or just someone who's listening, is like, hey, what's my first step to start helping?
Yeah, so the hub uses hundreds of volunteers to pull off everything I've talked about today. We choose the route of keeping a really lean team, so that we have to look at people and say, oh, we can't do this without you. Like, that's not just like a pithy saying where we're like, we can't do this without you. We're literally like, we literally can't. So we have volunteers for everything from serving meals at the Lovewell Center. We have a Tuesday night community meal where, it's funny, volunteer is the only word that exists. We don't really use that word when it comes to when you show up at the community meal. We're like, sit down, eat. Like, it's not really like a traditional sense of volunteering, but it gives you the opportunity to come share a meal, help run our stores and things like that. We do breakfast on Wednesday mornings. Volunteers teach all of our classes. We have outreach teams that go out into the city. I mean, there's hundreds of opportunities. So when you go to our website, thehubministry.com, and you just click on serve, it will show you all the different things going on. So if that's where you want to start, we also do a quarterly training that you could come to. It's just it's a full Saturday. That's really for people who want to sort of step in and maybe do the deeper opportunities with us, like go on outreaches with Purchase or teach classes at the Lovewell. That's really helpful, because it's a full day of education on, you know, the populations we serve. So that's a good step. And then you can give online too. So when you click on donate, it'll tell you how to donate financially, but also items for the stores and stuff like that, awesome. Which is so valuable for us, because the model doesn't work if we can't stock the shelves with things that matter to people. So those are kind of the easy ways that people can step in. I think when people hear anti-trafficking, they're like, ooh, I am not volunteering there. So, you know, we have figured out a way to stage all of our opportunities. There's a lot of like get your feet wet stuff. That's just like,
I remember one of my groups one time was going and like doing the landscaping at one of the houses. That was housing,
which is huge.
And so I mean, it was just, we would go on a Saturday and just go cut the yard for them.
So we have everything from that to cooking meals to going into strip clubs. But you know, at the hub, it's not like, you want to volunteer, we're going to the strip club in 2 hours. You know, that's not how we do things. So you know, we have it's staged, and we make sure all of our volunteers get trained to do those deeper things. But so I mean,
and I think another cool thing too is there are also environments for the whole family to serve together, which is really cool to see. Because you know, I've brought my kids before on what.
It's so valuable. It is so valuable for kids to, you know, see it early, understand it early, be able to put words to it early, because I think that we can, you know, as we're all parents here, like we can stop that generational thing that the South kind of has about the view of people in poverty. Like we get to change that.
Yeah.
You don't have to like quit your job and come do what I do to change that.
Yeah.
You know, I always laugh, like my poor kids, like they're the weirdest. I mean, you know, they know every homeless person on every bench. They're like, Mom, there's Eric, you know, but man, like what I know to be true is when they get older, they will know at least to some degree the dignity of people. And that's what matters to me. Like, I don't, you know, I think my youngest would probably run the Hub one day. Yeah. She's wild enough to do it. I don't care about that. I just want them to see people and see dignity and value and worth. And that starts when you're young. Yeah. And so, we do have a lot of kids come and serve. And, you know, I always laugh talking with volunteers about, oh yeah, we had some interesting conversations on the way home. I'm like, I'm sure you did, because, you know, I mean, you're in and kids are so inquisitive and sponges. And so I'm like, I know my drive home from the Love Well with my kids is always very interesting, you know?
Well, and look, we, you know, serving our church rotates through serving on Sunday nights. And even if we do go, I don't want to go. Right. And there's always, when I do pull up, I'm like, there's just always this is weird, right? But then you walk in, and then an hour later you're leaving, and it's just the best thing. It's like, why aren't we doing this every single week?
Yeah,
you know? So,
I think that's really cool. It's really important for people to hear that. I mean, I think that people think, well, if I don't feel passionate about this, then I'm not called to it. And it's like, no, like biblically, there is, to some degree, a call on all of us to care about the poor. You don't have to, you know, feel like I do. You know, when I pull up, it's very different. But I think it's cool to hear that you do it anyways. Yeah. And I think that's a big part of obedience. I think people have this like rosy view in the faith world about what it looks like to be obedient. It's like, oh, you're just pumped about it. It's like, no, like sometimes you're doing it anyways. Like you're going, I don't want to do this, but you're doing it. And I think it's retraining your brain, right? And we were just having this conversation with a church partner recently of like, we've got to retrain the brain of people in the church that uncomfortable is not unsafe. And the only way to retrain that is to be uncomfortable a lot. Because people will be like, uh-oh, that guy's talking to himself in the church lobby. He's unsafe. No, not necessarily. He could be.
He could be.
Could be. But it's not 100%.
Sure.
You're uncomfortable, but you're not unsafe. And the only way is to do what you just said, is to put yourself into the discomfort enough that your brain can change in that way and say, I'm uncomfortable, but there's nothing wrong here. You know, this is just different from me, and different doesn't mean dangerous.
It's awesome. And let me mention this too. One of the best murals in the city is on the side of the Love Well, right?
I know.
I see those pictures pop up all the time, and I'm like, these people don't even know what's inside that building.
It's very Instagrammable.
But what does it say, Love Your City?
Yes.
Yeah,
it's in commercials and everything. Like someone will be like, oh, look at this commercial, and it's like our building in the back. We're actually gonna we redid the inside of the Love Well this past year, and then we're gonna get the outside repainted. And there was a big debate around like, you know, because the building is disgusting, so like we have to paint it. There's also a lot of like graffiti. You know, members have expressed their opinions on the side of the building. And so we've decided like we'll just redo, but we're not changing the Love Your City, because it's like people love it. So it's really funny.
Awesome. Oh man, so many. I want to keep going, but we got to stop. So
you're coming back.
You
I would
are
love
coming
to.
back.
I would love to.
Got to come back.
Yes.
Guarantee.
Yeah,
Yes.
and look, your husband is a long time listener.
I know.
We gave him a shout out.
Big fan.
Brent.
He is a big fan.
Yes.
Well,
we got to get him in here too.
Yes. Hey, thank you again.
Yes,
this was
thank
incredible.
you.
Every
Thank
time you
you.
talk, I'm just kind of like,
it's
my
insane.
mouth is just open, and I'm
So
crazy.
good.
But thank you for what you do.
Thank you.
Thank you for
and
having
let's
me.
do it again.
Yes, I would love
Awesome.
to.
All right.